Welcome back to Happiest 101. I'm Frank Clayton, as well, you should know by now. I'm a fully licensed mental health therapist in the state of Utah, and I am doing these videos because I am hoping to help people to be happier. And this is class 3, so if you're jumping in right here, I hope sincerely that you'll go back and partake of classes 1 and 2 and then come back. Um, but I have so much to share with you in this class, including we're going to bust the myths of happiness, but also, probably most importantly, what you've been really waiting for are what are the actual activities that we can do to help us to be long-lastingly happier. So before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the home opportunities that hopefully that you did do. Every week we would be having you do the Center for Epidemiological Studies Depression Scale, or the test for depression, and then the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire, and then the Beck Anxiety Inventory. So you definitely want to keep your finger on the pulse of how you're doing on those 3 measures. Also, I had you do the test on identifying your strengths. So that is a really important one. And I know it's 240 questions, but identifying your strengths and applying those strengths, as you'll find out a little bit later in the class, is actually very, very important. So that is um, I'm having a moment, the VIA character strengths test. Which if you haven't already taken it, well, it will be in your syllabus. If you haven't grabbed the syllabus, that is paramount, very, very important to the class. It's 20 pages. I suggest that you print it out and have it handy, very important. And please follow along, don't skip around. There's a lot of, I put a lot of effort into making sure that the class flows in a very specific way. So please don't jump around. Anyway. So, as I said, oh, okay, so the other things besides that, we're reading chapter 1 from our text, The How of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky. I have been teaching this class here locally for 16 years, and I've read a lot of books about positive psychology and happiness, and hands down, The How of Happiness is the best book I've ever read on the subject. So if you value your happiness, please make sure that you get that book. And then I also, as part of because there's mandatory and there's optional home opportunities. So I'm hoping that you at least did all of the mandatory stuff, which included the video by Amy Mullins called The Opportunity of Adversity. Really, really good stuff, very inspiring. And then the optional home opportunities were um, to read happiness activity number 3 from Sonia's book, Avoiding Overthinking and Social Comparison. And that's important. It's never, in my 16 years, that's never been on anyone's top 4, avoiding overthinking. And I love Sonia to death. And I know that she had great intentions, and it is great information, which was why I included it here in the syllabus. But it's not going to be one that you're going to naturally read as you're identifying your top happiness activities. Anyway, so very, very good reading. And then there was watching Brene Brown's video. It's not very long. I think it's only like 6 or 7 minutes, but it's called The 6 Types of People That Don't Deserve to Hear Your Shame Story. Because sometimes we go out and we share information with people, and then we end up getting, which is a very courageous act. And then if you share them with the wrong people, you can end up getting even more wounded or more hurt. And so I think that's a good video. And then um, now, one of the activities as part of the home opportunities is not only to identify your strengths, but take a problem that you're currently experiencing and apply your strengths, one of your top strengths, to solve your problem. Because what I've found is a lot of people will say that they have this really big problem, but they're like, well, I can't do anything about that because I'm not this enough, because I'm not that enough, or I don't have this skill or whatever. And so you're kind of letting go of like that attachment and saying, I don't have, like, let's say I'm not organized enough. And so, but you do have other strengths. So this would be applying the strengths that you do have to the problem that you have. Now, sometimes this takes a degree of ingenuity. Feel free to ask other people, hey, how can I use my sense of humor to resolve my problem or something like that. Anyway, highly recommend all of that. So, and then, oh, just before I move on, I want to throw it out there about our Facebook page, which is the link is included in the syllabus. Please join us there and find a happiness buddy. That would be really great. That's something that I found was a huge game changer for the classes when we implemented, we call it the Happiness Buddy program, because you're going to be a lot more inclined to follow through and be encouraged. We're going to talk about this more later in the class as well, but there's some very important reasons behind um, making sure that you have someone to go along with you in this journey. And it doesn't have to be a happiness buddy from the class or from the Facebook page, but you can find somebody in your life, somebody hopefully that you're close to, maybe your partner or even your children, friends, whatever. So, all right, so that is going over the home opportunities for the week. By the way, if you ever have any questions or you get stuck on anything, feel free to email me. All right, let's move on to the stuff that you're really interested in. We're going to talk at first here about the myths of happiness. And because a lot of people are chasing what they think that will make them happy, and it doesn't work, and they're just absolutely baffled as to why it doesn't work. So in the book The How of Happiness, Sonia talks about these three myths. So the first one is, she calls it Shangri-La, which means you think if you just up and move to some ideal place that's absolutely beautiful and the skies are blue all the time, that then you'll be happy. And certainly that will occur for a short time, especially if you were to move from some place that has like a lot of snow or something. I have talked in the class about, like, if you moved from Minnesota, let's say, in the middle of winter, and you've been out there with your key, and I don't know if you know this, but sometimes if you have to put your key, which is kind of archaic, right? Who uses a key anymore? But back in the day, um, if you're because your locks could actually get frozen, right? So what you would do to unfreeze the lock in your car is you would put the key in and take a lighter, and you'd be sitting there in the cold, and you're like trying to use your lighter to heat up the key to melt the the ice that's in the lock. And I mean, so if this person moved from Minnesota to, say, Southern California in the winter, man, you can bet that they're going to be a lot happier in Southern California for a time, right? The first time that they come out and they go to their car and they're just like, hey, look at me. I don't have to shovel ice and snow, and I don't have to heat up the key to be able to unlock my vehicle. Look at me. And for that first day, they'd be really, really happy. But then the second day, they'd be still happy about it, but not quite as much. And then the third day, not quite as much. And so, and after a while, it's like, oh, I got a meeting to go to, and they forget, right? And so there's a phenomenon as to why this happens. And this is a big one that hinders us from being long-lastingly happier. I'm going to talk about it, don't worry, I'm going to talk about it more. Um, so, so do you think that they'd be really happy moving from Minnesota to Southern California, especially if it was in the middle of winter? Yes, of course, but that doesn't really last. Okay, so that is one of the myths of happiness. The other myth is either you're born with it or you're not. And there is some truth to this. Now, we've heard people use the phrase a born optimist, and there is some truth to that. But if you believe that you're either born happy or you're not, then that could definitely undermine you from even trying. So if you think, well, I see these mythical creatures called happy people, excuse me, and I see them being happy, but well, I wasn't born with that, so I guess I'm just stuck with unhappiness. And I'm going to talk a lot about this more in just a minute. The last one is what she calls the myth of circumstances, or I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if. And this is a really, really big one. I hope that you'll catch yourself if you say, well, I would be happy if such and such happened. There's a really great video out there by a woman named Nightbird on America's Got Talent. Man, this video, it makes me cry almost every time. And I just absolutely love Nightbird. And the song and her spirit is just amazing. Anyway, so there is something that she says in there that you can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. So what an absolutely amazing quote. You can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. Think about that. Really think about that. So, so this I'll be happy when or I'll be happy if just doesn't play out. And a lot of the things that we hang our hat on, we think, oh, I would be happy. If you ask a lot of people, on average, people will say, well, if I hit the lottery, if I suddenly became really rich, then I would be happy. And that's things like getting married, getting that next promotion, getting all the way through school, having a baby, maybe even getting a divorce is what, well, I'd be happy if I just wasn't married to this person anymore. So, so that it will have an effect in the short run, but it doesn't have an effect in the long run. And I want to talk about why this is. So if you look on the cover of Sonia's book, you see a pie. And that pie is divided into 3 sections. And so I'm going to talk about each one of those. So there's 50%, 40%, and 10%. 50% of the pie is our genetics. And so you look to your family history, like mommy and daddy and your extended family, and how are they doing as far as being a happy person? So um, now, if it sounds like a lot, and it is, 50% of our happiness is contingent on our genetics, and that does sound like a lot. But do you know, at one point they thought that our genetics were so fused to our happiness that they thought it was about as easy to get happier as it was to get taller. They thought that our happiness was so entrenched with our genetics that it was to the tune of 90%. So 50% sounds pretty good now, doesn't it? Okay, so I'm sure that you're curious about these other parts of the pie. And now this next part is one of the reasons that I keep teaching this class and have for 16 years. Because, and this is related to that myths of circumstances, that the 10% of our happiness is what she calls life circumstances. So this is the getting married, getting divorced, getting a promotion, hitting the lottery, even becoming a paraplegic. I mean, you would think that becoming a paraplegic, it's like, well, that's it. I'm never going to be happy again. But they found, and this is, I love the science of positive psychology. They found that that even if you became a paraplegic, and I'll be honest with you, I would have forecasted it's like, well, my happiness is in the toilet, and that's it. That's that's just how it is now. But um, but even becoming a paraplegic will not cause us to be permanently unhappy. So there's this. if you think of it like you think of that you have your baseline, right? So baseline, we could call that your normal. And so you have your normal, and then what happens is when something really awful happens, your happiness goes down. But what they found is that even though we forecast that we go down and we're going to stay down, that gradually it comes back up to our baseline. Now they found that conversely, that there's also a truth that happens that when we become like really happy, like we hit the lottery and our happiness like spikes way up, that the same phenomenon happens, that we go way up and then slowly, 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 we return back to our baseline. So this indicates that we have kind of a happiness thermostat of sorts. Now, a real thermostat goes up a little bit. It goes, maybe 3 degrees. It's too hot, the AC kicks on. Or it goes down a few degrees, oh, it's too cold, and the heater kicks on. But unlike a thermostat, and this thermostat is set by our genetics, but unlike a thermostat where it only has 3 degrees in each direction, our happiness thermostat goes up. There's a swing of 40%. Excuse me, yeah, 40%. So that 40% is the other part of that pie. And this is the part that I have spent 16 years maximizing what is important that's in that pie, so that I know every trick, I know every hack, because my genetics personally are predisposed on both sides of my family to depression. So I don't just say, well, I guess that's it for me. I want to maximize that 40%. So what is the 40% of your happiness pie? And that is your choices. What are your choices? What are your attitude? An easy example is you hit the lottery. Well, some people will be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Look at all the people that I can help with this. And the other people will be like, oh, do you know how much I'm going to pay in taxes on all that? So it isn't the winning the lottery or whatever the thing might be. It's your attitude toward that. And so one of the most important concepts, and we're going to talk about this more, is what is it that we actually have control of? I'm going to be talking more about this. Given what I have talked about so far, what is it that you think will actually make you happy? One of the home opportunities for this week is a video called The Paradox of Choice, because we have these choices in front of us, and very often we end up making the wrong choices that will be conducive to our long-term happiness. Like, here's a good example. A lot of times people think that more choices is better, and more choices can be better. I mean, if you're thinking you have zero or no choices, or you only have one choice, so having more choices than that is better, but is it better to have 7 or 8 choices or 3 or 4 choices? So the correct answer there is 3 or 4 choices. So we do have some choices, but we're not overwhelmed by the number of choices. So Barry Schwartz in that video, he talks about, back in the day when you went to go buy a pair of blue jeans, it was just like a pair of blue jeans. What's your size? End of story. And now we're overwhelmed by all of these different choices that we have about, well, is it straight leg? Is it flare bottom? Is it relaxed fit? Is it a tight fit? Does it have rips? Does it not have rips? Is it, this shade of blue or that shade of blue? And so we can be really overwhelmed and in a way kind of incapacitated by having too many choices, which actually detracts from our happiness. Sometimes it's even better for someone else to make choices for us. But this is something, now that I'm using that word so much, that I want to introduce you to the hammer. And this is something that is just so fun because, anytime that you say like, oh, I'm trapped, I'm in a rock and a hard place, I don't have any choices. Like, I want you to remember this. Okay, so it's very simple. It goes like this. Choice, choice, choice. I always, always, always have a choice. Do that with me. Choice, choice, choice. I always, always, always have a choice. And what is it that you have your choices with? You always have your choices about how you think about things and your beliefs about things and your attitude about things. So I want you to think about that. If there's areas of your life that you're saying, I'm trapped, you don't understand, there's nothing that I can do, try to just consider, because I mean, there's a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And so this is a guy that was in a Nazi concentration camp, and he still found a way to make choices that improved a very, very difficult situation. So I just want you to think about that, because if you just say, well, I'm screwed, I'm trapped, there's nothing that I can do, then you really feel that way, and then you stop looking for choices. Let's move on to the most important point, which is you want to know how to be lastingly happier. That's what you really want. That's why you're coming to the class. And by the way, please, because this is only class 3, right? Please don't just take these 18, 19 different happiness activities and say, well, I now know what will make me happy and I'm out. I have so much more to share with you. So make sure that you stick around. So here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to give you the 19 different happiness activities, and then I'm going to go back over each one of those. Now, you're reading The How of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky. Again, best book on the subject that I've ever read. But even before there was a positive psychology, there was another researcher, because that's what Sonia is. She is a researcher and she studies the area of happiness. But there's another researcher over on the other side of our country named Barbara Fredrickson, and she wrote a book called Positivity. This is a fantastic book. So Barbara was studying positive psychology even before there was a positive psychology. And so as you imagine that Barbara came up with her own list of happiness activities, because she was also studying these mythical creatures called happy people and trying to figure out what would actually make them happy. So Sonia came up with her list of 12 different happiness activities, and Barbara Fredrickson came up with her own list, which also happens to number 12, different happiness activities. And so, as you would imagine, there is some crossovers, there are some duplicates in their list, not surprising. But what's really great is there's also several that are different. So not only am I going to give you the list from Sonia's book, I'm also going to give you the list from Barbara Fredrickson's list. And you can apply the person activity fit diagnostic in Sonia's book to not just the 12 that she offered, but also the others that are also given by Barbara Fredrickson. So here is our list. These are the lists of scientifically proven activities that people can do to be long-lastingly happier. All right, we have expressing gratitude, cultivating optimism. Now, Sonia came up with one called avoiding overthinking and social comparison, which I've mentioned earlier. Now, I'm not really a fan of that one so much, as I've kind of mentioned. Um, but I'm going to replace that one on the list with 2 from Barbara's list. And I'll talk more about that in a second, but I just want to give you the bullet points, and then I'm going to go back over each one individually. Moving on, there's practicing acts of kindness, nurturing social relationships, developing strategies for coping, learning to forgive, doing more activities that truly engage you, also known as flow activities, savoring life's joys, committing to your goals, practicing religion or spirituality, taking care of your body, which includes meditation on Sonia's side. And then these are the ones from Barbara Fredrickson. So there is be open. And these are the two that I'm using to replace avoiding overthinking and social comparison. Um, so, and those two are developing distractions and disputing negative thinking. And moving on with Barbara's list, there's find nearby nature, learn to apply your strengths, meditate mindfully, meditating on loving kindness, and visualizing your future. So at this point, if we were live in the class, I'd say, what questions do you have? But we're not live in the class. So I will go circle back around and talk about the importance of each one of these 19 different scientifically proven happiness activities. So expressing gratitude, very, very important. So expressing gratitude, in fact, let's talk for a moment about positives. So taking a few minutes out of your day to focus on and um, express gratitude or appreciation for things that you're grateful for is found to be hugely important. It's one of the cornerstone activities in positive psychology developed by Martin Seligman. He calls it three good things. I call it positives. And so what this is pretty simple. It's taking a few minutes out of your day and you think of something that you're grateful for or appreciate, and then you kind of meditate on that for a few minutes and write down in maybe a gratitude journal 2 or 3 sentences as to why you're grateful for that thing. But what's even better is if you share it with other people, because you could take turns doing your three positives. And so you can share it with them, but they can share it with you. And I found over time that there's like a synergy that happens, because they might say that they're grateful for something that maybe you've never even thought of. Here's a fantastic example. One of my students named Katrina, she said that she was grateful for housework. Now, I don't like housework. I don't know about you, but I don't like housework. And so she said she's grateful for housework. And I was like, okay, I'll be open to that. So tell me, Katrina, like, why are you grateful for housework? And she said that when she's cleaning her house, she's thinking of her family. And this is a way that she's saying, I love you. She wants her home to be safe and to be clean, so that when her grandchildren come over and are crawling around on the floor and getting into things, that they can be in a nice, warm, happy, and safe home. And so I'll be honest with you, it didn't make me like housework anymore, but it helped me to have a different perspective on, on housework. So, um, that is one of the powerful tools in our tool belt, is to express gratitude. By the way, I found, and this is one of those moments where the teacher became the student, is that I found that my students were saying, well, Frank, not really that much into writing down my positives in a gratitude journal, but I love sharing it with my family members. And so what they would do is they would make it as part of their meal, when they're around the table and they're saying, hey, what's something that you're grateful for today? But even they could do it as part of their nighttime ritual with their children. And so they'd say, hey, little girl, hey, daughter, what's something that you're grateful for today? And what was great is that you could find that even a little 3-year-old could be your accountability partner. Mommy, we can't go to sleep yet. We haven't done our positives. And so I just love this stuff so much. And so what I love about that is that you're helping your children, the next generation, who may very well pass it along to their children, and the ripple effects that potentially could happen of helping to them to be not only happier, but more optimistic and more resilient during troubled times. So I love positive psychology so much. So I'm really, really glad you're here, by the way. All right, let's move on to the next one in our list, and that's cultivating optimism. Optimism is incredibly important, and again, if you've heard the words like a born optimist, and so if you think, well, you weren't born an optimist, please don't let that stop you, because um, okay, true confession. So I had been teaching Happiness 101 for, I don't know, probably 2 years at this point. And I was having my students, as you should have taken the optimism test. And I took, one of my students said, "Hey, Frank, have you taken the optimism test?" And I was like, you know what? That's solid. Like, I haven't taken the optimism test. And why haven't I? So I took the optimism test, and me being me, I got the test results, but that wasn't enough. I read an entire book on the subject, and and I quote, "My test score said, 'Hey, Happiest therapist, you are hopelessly pessimistic, hopelessly pessimistic.'" And I was like, wow, can the happy therapist actually be like hopelessly pessimistic? Is that okay? And so, as I said, I read this book called Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman. And I liken this to, because sometimes when you see like a magic trick, you're like, oh my gosh, that's impossible. There's no way that they could have done that. But then, like, once you learn the trick, like, sometimes magicians will reveal how they did their trick, and then you find out they just crimped their pinky over or something like that. And so, all of a sudden, like, when you know the trick, when you know how it works, all of a sudden you're like, oh, anybody could do that. So that's incredibly important to know that your level of optimism, you can really dial it in to be whatever level that you want it to be. So now, am I deliriously optimistic now? No. But then, and I love how he did this in the book. He said that we can be too optimistic. It can actually be, you can be optimistic to a point where it's actually dangerous. And so he doesn't um, espouse becoming, the most deliriously optimistic person that you can be, but also you don't have to be doomed to be pessimistic. So if you're interested in improving your optimism, that is a fantastic book. All right. Avoiding overthinking and social comparison. I've kind of already talked about this. I would highly recommend reading that part of the book. But I'm not crazy about this one on Sonia's list because instead of it being a positive action, it's a negative action. And I don't mean negative as in negative. I mean negative as in it's not that you are actively doing something, it's that you're not doing something. So avoiding overthinking and social comparison. Um, and so, as I said, I'm not going to beat the horse with this anymore, but I'm going to talk more about how to avoid overthinking and social comparison by talking about Barbara Fredrickson's two of developing distractions and disputing negative thinking. Okay, moving on. Practicing acts of kindness. So, again, this has been scientifically proven to help people to be actively happy. And so I love doing when you're doing like a secret act of kindness where nobody else knows about it, and you get all of the excitement of planning it. But it doesn't have to be something really big and elaborate. It could just be like paying for somebody's meal. When you're um, going through the drive-through or something, or just helping somebody out that may need it. You might see, if you went to your local mall, for example, excuse me, if you went to your local mall, for example, and you're just actively looking for opportunities to do something nice for someone else. So that's one of those things that makes us feel good. And I think that although that doesn't have to be your primary focus, I think that practicing acts of kindness can also help you to feel better if you struggle with self-esteem, as many, many people do. By the way, later in the class, I'm going to be addressing self-esteem because I found, in fact, two classes really ish are going to be talking about self-esteem. And I found that's a necessary part of the class because I found as a teacher that some people were undermining their happiness because they felt like that they didn't deserve it, which I think is very sad. So anyway, we're going to be talking more about that later in the class. All right, nurturing relationships. hugely important. This is one of those that's on both Sonia and Barbara's lists, because one of the giants in positive psychology, I believe it was Ed Diener, said there are no happy hermits. So developing connections with other people is so important. And sometimes people want to isolate. And what I think of is you got these big, big tough guys in prison, and the worst punishment that they can do to them is solitary confinement. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be the life of the party. It doesn't mean that you have to be an extrovert in order to be happy. But it is very important that we have at least a couple of people in our lives to be able to connect with. So, can't say enough about this one. Very, very important. If you're really having struggles with connecting with people, or you're finding yourself to be actively avoidant of people for whatever reason, I highly suggest that you seek out the help of a mental health therapist. All right, moving on. Developing strategies for coping. So we're talking about coping skills here. Um, so if you don't have an arsenal of coping skills, because most of the time, if you really sit back and think about it, you probably already know things that you could do to help yourself if things got difficult. So there are, maybe it's just cuddling up with a warm blanket and watching a Disney movie or something like that. But a lot of people know, hey, if you're really struggling, maybe you reach out to a friend. So, by the way, if you are ever feeling suicidal, please, please, please get some help. Don't suffer. You can text or call here in the United States 988 if you're feeling at all ever suicidal. So even something like that would be a coping skill, to have somebody to reach out, knowing that you could always have someone to call. But and I think that a good, I call it the arsenal, a good list for coping skills should address different scenarios. So you might have something very acute, like something really bad just happened, and you just need to like get through the next few minutes. Or you might have something that is like more drawn out, more long term. You should have coping skills for anxiety. You should have coping skills for depression. Sometimes there'll be some crossover of those, but developing a list of coping skills and then have them in a place that's readily available. Could be in a piece of paper in your pocket. It probably would be more likely that you'd want to put that in your phone, if you have one, and have that readily available. Don't bury it someplace where you can't find it. Make it someplace where you can get to it easily. But yeah, so that's one of the other uh, things that can help us to be happy. Here is a big one: learning to forgive. Now, forgiveness is, I, I feel very strongly about this. There's a lot of people, and it seems that a lot of this comes out of the religious world, that people will say you have to forgive, and I very strongly um, counter that. Going back to the issue of choice, that forgiveness is a choice. It's always a choice. You always have a choice. Now, there are consequences for not forgiving, but it is still a choice. And here's why I'm so um, passionate about this particular subject, because anytime that we say you have to do something, then you're going to have resistance to it. If I told you you have to go to Disneyland, it's an absolute imperative that you go to Disneyland in order to be happy. And I told you you have to, just because I told you that you have to do it, then you're going to be resistant and not want to do it. So recognizing that you do have a choice to forgive or to not forgive. But again, there are consequences that go along with not forgiving. There's a lot of interesting misunderstandings about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. Um, I've heard, and you've probably heard this before, that me holding on to resentment and not forgiving is like me taking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. I mean, the other person's just going on about their life and doing their thing. They're not thinking about how much this is hurting me. So what's interesting is that we seem to think that by holding on and not forgiving someone gives us some sort of control, right? It's like, well, if I forgive them, then they got away with it. What does that have to do? What does one have to do with the other? Like, you holding on and not forgiving, that's only hurting you. So Sonia has some great stuff in the book about the issue of forgiveness, even if it doesn't make it to your list of things that are one of from the Person Activity Fit diagnostic, even if it doesn't make it up there to one of your top happiness activities, I'd still suggest that you read that if this is an area that you struggle with. All right, moving on. Doing more activities that actually engage you. So, and again, this is in the world of positive psychology, this is what we call a flow activity. And this comes from Mike Csikszentmihalyi. He's one of the big giants. He's passed on now, but I got a picture with him and got to meet him before he passed, which is really good. Actually, I've got to meet almost all of my happiness heroes. I would say, with the exception of Brene Brown, but she's so high up there. I would love to meet her someday. But yeah, I've got to meet Sonia and Barbara and Martin Seligman, and you know, I have so many great stories. I've gone to these conferences, these 3-day conferences by the International Positive Psychology Association, and they usually have them every couple of years, and so they're always just an amazing. I feel like a kid in a candy store when I go to these. Anyway, I digress. So flow activities, or activities that actually engage you, is where you're doing something and you just lose all track of time. You're so engaged in it that you forget, you might forget to eat, you might forget to use the bathroom, but you lose all track of time. And so it can be a fantastic activity, especially for people who deal with chronic pain or are dealing with acute pain. I had a situation one time where I had a pretty finite amount of time and I was experiencing a tremendous amount of pain. So what I did, I really love video games. And so video games is an activity that, well, at least for me, that like really engages me, and the pain doesn't go away, but it distracts you from the pain in a very real way. But when I had this particularly difficult bout of pain in this short period of time, I took to virtual reality. So I have an Oculus, and I was able to put it on, and it doesn't sever the mind-body connection, but it seems to. So you're doing this activity, you're so caught up in it that you forget, you forget your body. So if you're struggling with chronic pain, doing these flow activities can help you through. You don't have to have VR in order to do this, but you can use these flow activities to help you to get through that. But even just as one of the happiness activities that help people to be lastingly happier. So flow activities. Savoring life's joys. Um, Again, this kind of knocks on the door of doing the positives, but like really thinking about it, and focusing on the good things, focusing on what's right rather than what's wrong, can make such a big difference. This seems like a great time to tell you the story of the two wolves. So I've heard many different variations of this story. I'll just tell you the story the way that it was told to me. So in the the story of the two wolves, so you have this Indian chief, and he's this big barrel-chested man. He's got this big headdress, and he's talking to the tribe, and his little grandson is down front and center. And he says, inside of us are two wolves. And one of these wolves is all about love and harmony and brotherhood. And the other wolf is all about dissension and hate and war. And these two wolves are jockeying for dominance inside of you. And the little grandson's eyes get like really big. And he says, which one wins, Grandpa? Which one wins? And he said, the one you feed. So when you're savoring life's joys, you're feeding the positive wolf. You're actively using your concentration to focus on what is right. And what that does is it trains your brain to look for more of what is right than feeding the other wolf. While I'm talking about the two wolves, just want to throw it out there. I'm not getting any kickbacks or anything, but if you want to help yourself to be long-lastingly happier, there's a really great podcast called The One You Feed podcast. And of all the different happiness podcasts, this is the one that I like the most. He has some really fantastic guests on. They're all over the place. You could have a comedian one week and a Buddhist monk the next week, but they all talk about happiness and feeding the positive wolf and what you can do to be long-lastingly happier. So really like to strongly recommend that. All right, moving on, committing to your goals. So we talked about goals in um, one of the previous classes, and so some people are really, really good at this. Some people not so much. But identifying your goals, committing to them, and pushing through and doing what needs to be done. Some people they love that. And I don't know about you, but I've actually found myself creating a checklist just so I can check stuff off. It feels really good. Even if it's something I've already done, I'll say, yeah, I already took the trash out today, and so I'm going to put it on the list just so I can check it off. So and this is one of those things that, like I said, you may or may not be good at this, but in a natural way, but there's still a lot of value that can come from it. And I'm realizing right now that I've failed to talk about the buffet. So I think of these 19 different positive psychology activities to help you to be long-lastingly happier as a buffet. So you have things on the buffet. When you go to a buffet, you have things on the buffet that you know that you like. You have things on the buffet you know that you don't like. And inevitably, there's usually some weird dishes that you're like, I don't even know what that is. I'm going to stay away from that. So things you like, things that you don't like, and things that you've never tried. And so there's one activity that I'm thinking of specifically that I'm guessing that you've never tried. So how would you know that it's one of your top activities if you've never tried it? My point being is that if committing to your goals is not necessarily your thing, that's totally fine. The purpose of this whole thing is to find out and tailor make a plan so that you can figure out what activities work for you. So if committing to and going after your goals is not particularly your thing, let's find out what your thing is. And so I wanted to throw out one last thing before I move on about committing to your goals is a book called Atomic Habits. Really, really good book. I read this only very recently. And if you have certain goals, like weight loss, for example, that you want to create good habits that are going to be conducive to that goal, rather than doing some big push and then you meet your goal and then you go back to bad habits, which might make you regain the weight. So just wanted to throw that out as well. All right, moving on. Um, Practicing religion or spirituality. This is whatever kind of religion or spirituality that works for you. Um, there's a lot of people that have found a fantastic amount of happiness and contentment and harmony and joy in practicing their religion or spirituality. I think a big component of this is that you're gathering around with other people of the same sort of belief system. And so again, going back to what was said about being around other people and having connections with other people, I think that going to whatever your version of a church might be gives you the opportunity to be social and to connect with other like-minded people. So that's that one. And then the last one on Sonia's list is, excuse me, is taking care of your body. Now, again, love, love, love Sonia, but I think that she tried to pack too much. I think that she really wanted to have the number 12. So she packed, I think, too much into this one happiness activity because it includes exercise, which I'm going to talk more about, but also um, uh, meditation and smiling. And so there's some interesting things about smiling, how it's called the facial feedback hypothesis. And so when we smile, there's a little part of our brain that says, ooh, there must be something to smile about. And it will release a little dose of happy chemicals into the body. Again, excuse me. So that's an interesting one. They've done some interesting experiments. You might go out on whatever your platform is and look that up about smiling experiments, positive psychology. Anyway, I'm going to talk more about this in a second, but I wanted to put a bookmark in that on Sonia's list, it does say about meditation. She talks in more in this little, this happiness activity about meditation and its importance. But Barbara's list has two. On her list of 12, meditation was so important. It wasn't just one, but two forms of meditation that can help us to be long lastingly happier. So I don't want to beat the horse now. I'll do that later. So meditation, hugely important. And then exercise. Exercise is one of the absolute best things that we can do. If you're struggling with depression, please find some form of exercise that can help you to be happy, because um, they found that when we exercise, it releases 8 different, call them happy chemicals. It releases 8 different happiness chemicals into the body when we exercise. And also, not exercising is not really in our true nature. Our bodies were made to be active and be up. It wasn't meant for this sedentary lifestyle. So when we're um, sitting around and we're not active, that in and of itself can lead us. It doesn't mean that we're going to be depressed, but it kind of um, predisposes us in that direction. So I think that that's actually one of the reasons why our country is on average struggling with depression so much. It's just a sedentary lifestyle. They found, if you're interested in using exercise to help you to be happier, um, they found that it is the best thing that you can do is aerobic exercise for at least 20 minutes 3 times a week. So if you want to lift, I'm not trying to deter you from lifting or doing other stuff, but please augment that with aerobic activity. Again, at least 20 minutes 3 times a week. Now, talk a little bit about what kinds of activities, because I don't like exercise. I really, really don't. However, does that, because in my brain, I go, oh, exercise, I don't like that. But if you were to say, hey, Frank, you want to go body surfing? Yeah, body surfing. Let's do this. This is amazing. Now, body surfing is amazing physical activity. However, I don't think of body surfing as exercise. So this is kind of a hack. It's kind of a way around me thinking, oh, I don't want to exercise, but I do want to go body surfing, which happens to be fantastic exercise. So there are ways that maybe, like if you were to go dancing, for example. So you can use that person activity fit diagnostic for this exact thing, to figure out what would be an exercise that you could do that would help you to get out there and burn those calories, get those happy chemicals into your body. Isn't it amazing that I've always thought of exercise as only helping me physically, but until I got into positive psychology, I didn't even realize how much it could help you mentally as well. All right, let's move on to Barbara Fredrickson's list. And the first one on her list is to be open. And all this really means is, instead of labeling things as good or bad, black or white, like you could say, you could look at things and just be open and say, wow, this is an experience that I'm having. It might lend itself to seeming like a bad situation, but you're just being open to the experience of all of it, the good and the bad. And really, that's all that one is. There isn't a whole lot more to say about that one. Again, pick up her book, Positivity by Barbara Fredrickson. It's in your resource list at the end of the syllabus. Now, going back to, we had talked about avoiding overthinking and social comparison, and we're going to go over here to develop distractions and disputing negative thinking. Developing distractions. And what this means is that this goes back to what was said about from Sonia about avoiding overthinking and social comparison. Developing distractions is a great way to keep your mind on something and off of other things, such as overthinking or ruminating about something. Now, you have to be careful about this one, that you're not overdoing it and developing or indulging in your distraction to the point that potentially it becomes an addiction. This is meant to be something that's relatively short term to help you get through a very difficult short term situation. All right, next on the list is disputing negative thinking. So we all have this voice in our head that starts telling us that we're terrible and we don't know what we're doing and we're an awful person and all of that terrible stuff. So this is a way to dispute that, because in cognitive therapy, this is a technique called disputation. So when you have that awful thought come into your head, you can dispute it and say, no, no, that's not true. And you dispute it with your cognitive mind, because our emotional mind has a tendency to, say these very terrible things. So don't let those negative thoughts or words from someone else, don't let those pass by, because when we're passive and we don't dispute these things, emotionally we take it on as if it's true. Because if we're not disputing negative thinking, then in a way we're complicit in this terrible thing, whatever it is that's being said. So please be good at disputing negative thinking. All right, next on Barbara Fredrickson's list is Find Nearby Nature. And every time that I read this one, I think of this little spot that used to be near my old office, because there was a lot of cement around my old office. I mean, you were hard pressed to find any green at all. But I found, tucked back behind this business building, was this oasis. It looked like a little park, and there wasn't really a whole lot to it, to be honest with you. There was a very nice tree, and underneath it was a couple of picnic tables, and then a nice swath of grass, probably about 40 feet by 80 feet, something like that. And especially when I was stressed out, I would go over to this little patch of green, take off my shoes and socks, and just walk in the grass and maybe sit under the shade of the tree. And it was very, very peaceful. And it was kind of this island of nature among all of this concrete. And I found it to be really, really restorative. But you're fine nearby nature. It might be the mountains, it might be the desert, it might be the beach. I mean, I am all about the beach. Love, love, love the beach. So that also, but again, on the buffet, that might not necessarily be your thing. So let's move on to the next thing on our list by Barbara Fredrickson. And this is Learn to and Apply Your Strengths, which was kind of already covered because we talked about the VIA character strengths test. So finding out what your strengths are through that test and applying them. And it's just a fantastic way to deal with your problems. So that's another thing on the buffet. I'm not going to hit on that much more because we've kind of already touched on it previously. And then, as I mentioned, Barbara Fredrickson felt that meditation was so important that she didn't have it on her list just once, but twice. So the first one is meditating mindfully. Now, if you have ADHD or ADD or are psychotic, like if you hear voices in your head, this is not going to be a meditation for you that's going to work, because asking a person with ADD or ADHD to um, calm your thoughts or quiet your thoughts is like asking a blind man to see. If you have ADD or ADHD, please see a prescriber. This is something that talk therapy really, we can teach you in talk therapy about how to deal with that, but no amount of talking is going to override this, because it is a biologically driven issue. So again, if you struggle with ADD or ADHD, please see a prescriber. Beyond that, meditating mindfully, very, very powerful. What you're doing is that you're exercising your mind into helping it to be quieter. Now, I used to think that I was terrible at meditation, because every time that I would try to quiet my mind, I'd have some thought pop into my head and I'd get frustrated, like, I suck at this. I can't do this. And then somebody explained to me, it was very, very interesting, that it's kind of backwards from the way that I conceptualized it. So the real power of this form of meditation, when you're trying to quiet your mind, and it's that kind of thing where they'll say, well, if you have a thought, you just send it on its way, and get back to quieting your mind. I used to feel, as I said, frustrated when I would have the thought, but the way it was explained to me is that the real power of meditation is when you have the thought and you send it on its way. That's the real, I think of it like going to the gym. So the real power is not when you're successfully quieting your mind, it's when you're pushing the thought away. So this actually changed everything about the way that I think of meditation. So every time I would shoo the thought away, now I'd be like, haha, I did it successfully again. And by the way, there are so many ways to meditate. Please don't, like I said before, please don't just categorically say I suck at meditation, because there are so many different kinds of meditation. There's guided meditations, there's walking meditations. And really all meditating is quieting your mind and getting into the present moment. Over on my shelf over there, there is a book called Meditation for Dummies. It's one of those dummies books. And there is almost overwhelming about how many different ways that you can do meditation. And there's also, meditations don't have to take very long. There's one over there, I think it's called the 5-minute meditation. So please, if you haven't tried meditation, please give it a shot. If you have tried meditation and think you're not good at it, please don't categorically dismiss it. I would hope that you would say, I haven't found a meditation that's right for me yet. Which brings us to the other form of meditation. And before I talk about this, I want to explain, this is absolutely amazing. So I want you to think of the happiest person that you know. Okay, I'll give you just a second. The happiest, and it doesn't, yeah, it probably should be somebody that you know personally. So think of somebody that is the happiest person that you know. Now think of that person, if their level of happiness, will say that that's 100%, if you were to take 50% of that and stack it on, so that the happiest person you know is now 150% rather than just 100%. Well, when they studied this particular form of meditation, they studied these Buddhist monks. And it's so funny to see pictures of them, because they have this like electronic beanie. They've got all these electrodes measuring their brain waves while they are doing this particular form of meditation. So I want you to think of a bell curve, right? And so on the bell curve, you have the majority of the population in the middle, and then as the bell curve goes out this way and this way, it decreases and decreases. So the ones that are all the way out on the ends are what they call the outliers. So on one side, you have the saddest person of this 150 people, and on the other side, you have the happiest person that is in this 150 people. So they found that when they tested these Buddhist monks, they were completely and totally outside of the bell curve, like almost a full standard deviation outside of the bell curve. to where they were at 150. So that's why I was saying, think of the happiest person you know and then add another 50%. So this particular form of meditation has been found to be very, very powerful. Now, caveat to that, these Buddhist monks were meditating for hours and hours and hours a day. So I don't want to set up any unreasonable expectations that if you do this form of meditation that suddenly you're going to be 150%. But one of the presenters, Matthew Ricard, said that these guys are like Olympic champions. When we think of Olympians, we think of people who have really, really worked hard in their particular area, and they're like the best of the best. But that being said, that they found that even if you do this meditation just a few times a week, it can be very powerful and have a lasting effect. So this, without further ado, this form of meditation is called meditating on loving kindness. And it's really great because it can help you to obviously feel better, but it also can help you with your self-esteem. It can help you with forgiveness and help you to feel closer to other people. So, and one of the really great things, as I was just saying about meditation, that people will say that they can't meditate. All you have to do for this kind of meditation is, if you can hear my voice, then you can do this kind of meditation, because all you have to do is listen to it. I would recommend that you listen to it maybe with a pair of headphones and in a quiet place, and be giving it your undivided attention, but listening to it is the only thing that you have to do in order to do this meditation. And I have done one of these meditations that you can find out on the internet. Just look up Frank Clayton, Meditation on Loving Kindness. All right, and that's the one from the buffet that I'm thinking that you've never tried. I could be wrong, but if you haven't tried it, please give it a try. And then the last one from Barbara Fredrickson's list of positive psychology techniques to be long-lastingly happier is called Visualize Your Future. And this is where these happy people would kind of fantasize. They would use their powers of imagination to think of the future, and what if everything went right? What if everything went just exactly as they planned, and how that would play out. And so it's kind of this little bit of a mental game that you can play with yourself to help yourself be happier. And you know what? It might even help you to envision a future that you actually can get everything that you want. So those are the 19 scientifically proven happiness activities to help you be long-lastingly happier. Now, which ones do you pick? How do you know which ones from the buffet are going to work for you the best? And the answer is for you to use that person activity fit diagnostic in Sonia's book, or the one where you say, how natural is it for you on a scale from 1 to 7? How much do you enjoy it on a scale from 1 to 7? Now, the math in this can be rather onerous. So it is, you take the first 3 numbers, add them up, divide by 3 to get the average, take the last 2 numbers, add those up, divide by 2 to get the average, and then subtract the second number from the first number. And so a friend of mine made an Excel spreadsheet that I will get access to you, so that you can just plug in the raw numbers and figure out which one will help you to be long-lastingly happier. So that'll actually put it into kind of a spreadsheet, which is easy for you to, it'll be really easy for you to see which ones work best for you. All right. So that is class for today. And I wanted to take a minute to go over the home opportunities for this upcoming week. Our hope is that you will read chapter 2. As I mentioned earlier, watch the video, The Paradox of Choice. Go ahead and do your person activity fit diagnostic from the How of Happiness using these different activities. Of course, please join us on the Facebook group page and do your usual anxiety test, depression test, and happiness test. And then for the optional home opportunities this week, there's the video called The Art of Choosing by Sheena Leinecker. And there's another one. I love this video. Check this out. It's called um, Choice, Happiness, and Spaghetti Sauce by Malcolm Gladwell. It is a great video. Um, it makes me chuckle every time I think of Howard Moskowitz, and there's no perfect Pepsi. There's only perfect Pepsis, which I know makes absolutely no sense to you or whatever. But and then I put in here like read anything by Barbara Fredrickson's book Positivity. And then once you find out what your top happiness activities are, please feel free to share them on our Facebook group page. All right. So thank you so much for joining us for class 3 of the Happiest 101. I hope that you'll join us again soon for class number 4. And please be well.